Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just a few words from an industry perspective. I think all, or certainly most of you know that I represent the European Alliance of Companies for Energy Efficiency in Buildings, and that in policy we've been advocating a 40% 2030 target, knowing, as again shown by the Fraunhofer study, that buildings have the largest potential. And what I wanted to say is just to give a few thoughts about what I've heard this afternoon, and take my cue from the questions that Peter posed at the start. He first posed, we're going to ask ourselves what can be done to exploit the potential in buildings. And my first words on my sheet of paper here were to identify buildings as a key priority sector in the, as described in the Council conclusions for the future policy choices to be made in the EU. And in the same line, include energy efficiency in buildings as a key strand of the European energy security strategy, because energy security is an issue that has come very high on the agenda, and buildings and energy efficiency improvements in existing buildings are one of the most readily available, and as we see in the presentations this afternoon, cost-effective approaches to reduce energy demand. Peter then asked us what should be done. I mean, that was what can be done. And the first thing I think should be done is that we should persistently recall what Oliver did so eloquently, which is that the multiple benefits that come with addressing the energy efficiency potential in buildings are huge and go far beyond the energy savings potentials, which is what we hear policymakers talking almost exclusively about. So as a community, and indeed we are all supporters, I think, in the room of energy efficiency, so as a community we need to reach out more to other actors, nicely shown in the graph by BPIE, and use the multiple benefits and their monetization as a way of convincing people outside our circle to take steps to really transform the market. I agree entirely with Paula Ray Garcia, who has said that implementation of the existing directives at member state level is absolutely crucial to achieve the potential. And I'm proud to say that EuroACE works actively in that field, organising national workshops. We've now carried out 9 workshops in 9 member states precisely on this subject to alert stakeholders at member state level and government officials that there's a lot more potential that can be reaped from implementing properly these directives. I also wrote down we need to maintain research, and we need to maintain dialogue with the shareholders. So the dialogue that goes on between policymakers and decision takers and stakeholders is crucial. But a word not yet mentioned today that I think as an industry person can really help is innovation in our sector. We saw at the Renovate Europe Day 2 weeks ago that the construction sector has a very large impact on EU GDP, and that the construction sector is currently understaffed. It's still suffering significantly from the financial crisis, and that we could readily mobilize a lot of unemployed workers and bring them back into the market if the policies were in place to help drive renovation. And in that sense, innovation is really important for finding new approaches, new processes for the construction sector itself in the market. And we saw that again in Renovate Europe Day with the Dutch Energiesprong approach to prefabrication for renovation of existing buildings, causing no disruption to occupants and coming at a low cost. Did I see a figure on the wall for a cost of deep renovation of a building at over €100,000 here in one of the presentations? I think I did. In the Netherlands, that cost is today 65,000 and will be 45,000 within a year or 18 months. So whole building, zero energy renovation is possible at about 45 to 50,000 euro per building. Highly cost effective. Another thought that crossed my mind is that in the rollout of policy and in addressing the market, we should urge more concentration on the worst performing buildings first, as a first step, because the worst performing buildings offer the highest potential and the highest rewards in terms of multiple benefits. And I always like to quote the Cambridge Econometrics study carried out for Consumer Focus in the UK just over a year ago, which highlighted that where a government has concerns about upfront financing, there's an available source of money, which is the sale of carbon credits, which if diverted not into the general budget of a country but into renovation of worst performing social housing, would lead to lifting people out of fuel poverty in a very short space of time. But it would also stimulate the renovation market, the innovation and the learning curve. So it would be a win-win-win approach to do that. No cost to the government, because it's a new income stream that they could readily transfer across to our sector. I'm also, because the discussion will start shortly, I'm motivated to say that this debate we have today with researchers about baseline scenarios or base year points of departure is something I think about quite a bit. Because if you think in plain language and you say to somebody that the energy saving target to 2030 is 30%, what does a plain person think? They think, well, they're going to be 30% less than we consume today, the day we set the objective. Why can't policy be built as logically as that? Because then we'd be talking about real savings, as it were, and not scenarios which are already shown to be, and baselines already shown to be, outdated and not realistic. It's just a thought, it's provocative, but I think we should have some discussion around those kind of ideas. And then I was also struck by what Paula spoke about on incentives, and it reminded me that in his audition, Maros Sefcovic, now Commissioner for Energy Union, said specifically on the buildings topic that he felt we should be looking more at incentives. This can be seen on the EU Views website. And I completely agree, and I think the industry does, that if we are going to continue with incentives, and it does look like it might be necessary, then it should certainly be linked to the ambition of the depth of savings you achieve. They should not just be handed out willy-nilly, and they should not just be handed out to those who can afford to pay back. So there's a challenge there. And my last words were to say that I welcome the observatory for buildings, because you can't act on what you can't measure. And we definitely need much more data collection for the building sector to highlight this potential that we talk about so much, but that others don't seem to grasp or take a strong interest in. So these are a few points of view from my perspective, and I hope it helps to provoke a lively discussion now. Thank you.